And then I've been in alternative media ever since and worked for a variety of organisations. But it's UK column. I mean, it's just brilliant for me. Absolutely brilliant.
Excellent. Thank you for the kind words. Now, I remember the first interview that I did with you. I can't remember how long ago it was. It was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? And you wore a very nice yellow jacket, but that didn't go too well with our green screen. So you're looking lovely today, presentable in front of the camera, and you're not wearing yellow. So
No.
that's a plus point.
That was a schoolboy error on my part.
Yeah, well, okay. And viewers, of course, can't see it, but actually we are in a very different studio from the one that we've operated for many years. And this is the result of Mike Robinson doing a big change round with help from Patrick Henningson. So there was a good bit of teamwork going on there. So we're in a much nicer studio layout. And one of the things that this has made it easier to do is have a little bit more of an informal chat in the studio. So I said to Jemma, relax, it's going to be an easy one to do. And I think you were quite impressed when you walked in to see the new layout.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it doesn't look any different for you guys at home. You still see the classic UK column with the hoe behind us and everything. But actually, from a broadcast standpoint, there's lots of exciting things happening here. And the studio looks amazing. And I think people may see some changes in the future.
Well, there's a lot more to come, but that'll be enough of a little bit of advertising the UK column. But it's we're working very hard, not only to do more, but to make what we do look better. Professional, yes, but at the end of the day, we don't want to be too professional because then all sorts of accusations are made that we're too like that dreadful organisation I'm not going to mention. So this was a little discussion between Jemma and myself, which I prompted, and it's as a result of the fact that last week I was given the opportunity to speak at a gathering of mums who've had their children taken away through the so-called family court child protection system. And it was a great privilege for me because the organisation simply works with mums. And they specifically said to me that there were no men who were allowed to come anywhere near the meetings because some of the mums have had problems in relationships. So for me as a male to be invited to go and spend the day with the mums and to give a short talk was a great privilege. I decided that it would be good if I took Jemma. And the joke that we shared with the ladies, of course, was that as the only male present, I needed a chaperone. So Jemma kindly volunteered to come as my chaperone for the day. Of course, she wasn't needed because the mums were lovely and we had some really wonderful conversations with them and they were very welcoming. So now I'm not mentioning the name of the little charity, and this is because it's early days in our relationship, and they have to be very careful in the sorts of material that they're putting out and sharing. And so I was invited to give a talk. We are going to talk to you, the UK column audience, a little bit about how we found it. And I was particularly interested in how Jemma saw things because Jemma has got a little bit of understanding about what goes on when children are taken. But this was the first time that you've been able to meet in one environment. How many mums was it? 24, I think, or 25?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And therefore I said to Jemma, because she was new to the subject, I thought it would be really great if we had a chat where Jemma was able to tell me, this is feedback from me, but it's also feedback for the UK column audience, how she found the event and how she found hearing the stories and the cases that the women talked about. So we're allowed to say we went to a nice hotel close to London, and one of the meeting rooms in the hotel was set aside for the mums. Tell us how you found it, Gemma.
I mean, I don't really know where to start, because it really did make me look at myself that day, because I did go still with a bit of a mainstream media journalist head on, and that was my bad. And I went thinking, no smoke without fire. You know, these are mothers that have had their children taken off them. If a father has a child taken off them, it's generally because he's a bit of a wrong 'un. So something must have happened for these mums to have their kids taken off them. And I was expecting to hear stories that made me think, oh, well, yeah, well, you there's no, the blame game, that kind of thing. I would hear things that make me think, well, I'm not surprised you had your kids taken off you. You know, I had a very mainstream media trained head on when I walked through the door. But what I got was the exact opposite. And I was so overwhelmed by the amount of heart-centered, empaths, really, women that had just lived lives of not all, some had very nice childhoods, but some had very traumatic childhoods. So it led them to make not poor choices, but to maybe gravitate towards partners who really weren't suitable for them because they were very empathic themselves. And hearing stories that they came out with about what happened via maybe the control of the partner, which is why they didn't want any men there. There were some parallels in my own life where I thought, I've had experiences like that. Not all, but with partners, with control issues. And what I came away with, the takeout for me, the biggest takeout, was when some of the stories I heard, I thought this isn't actually even about the child. It's about the control of the woman through the child from the partner. That was some of the stories that I got. I didn't get to speak to all 24 women, but a few of the stories that I got, it was very much the partner wanting to take the children away and have them.
Yes.
So that the woman would be controlled by him via the kid. And some of the women were just so, ones I spoke to, so warm and wonderful. And I really was ashamed that I'd walked in there like a mainstream media journalist. Oh, I already know the story before it's even come out. I know what I'm going to write. I know what I'm going to say. Well, that was blown out of the water.
Thank you. Thank you very much for saying it in such a frank and honest way, because I didn't know how you would find. I knew you would find it difficult, but of course, key thing for me to say to the audience is this is the first I've dealt with. I don't know how many mums cases over the years that I've dealt with, but this was the first time that I've been able to be with a group of women, and initially, you and I sat outside while they said, just give us some time to just to relax the women. And I was very happy to do that, of course, and we sat and had a coffee. But when about an hour later, the door opened and we were encouraged to come in, it was obvious that inside that room had been a lot of emotion. And what we were subsequently able to see was, of course, that there were some mums who'd been associated with a charity for some time. And what does the charity do? Its main job is to help support and stabilise and strengthen women who've had their children taken away. So some of the women who'd been involved with the charity longer were clearly working very hard to calm down and support the mums who were new to the whole thing. And a comment which stuck in my head very quickly when we went into the room was one of the ladies said, well, of course, Brian, what you've got to remember is every one of these women would prefer not to be here.
Yeah.
And that was a very telling comment for me. So even the idea of coming together with other mums where support and they're strengthened by hearing other cases, it's not just them, but even having to listen to other mums talking about it, that was a powerful emotion.
Yeah, and there were lots of tears, and some women stood up and told their stories very bravely, very courageously, straight from the heart. And then, of course, you know, it's such a deep emotional issue, the mother-child bond.
Yes.
You know, you're not talking about maybe going through a bad divorce, or which is traumatic enough. But this is the ultimate love bond, and so the triggering was going on all the time, and suddenly you would hear some howls
Yes.
from the corner of the room as women just lost it, because it was bringing up everything for them.
Yes.
And I mean, I had tears. I had tears when you played that very emotive film where we saw, and it was a very powerful thing to do in that room, where we played some clips we've already showed on the column, anonymous clips of when people in social services and the police have come to take children away from their mums. Yeah. And that got the whole room, myself included. I've seen it on the column, but seeing it in that room with all the emotion and energy there, I'd gone. I was crying. I was like, oh my goodness me. But having said that, it was still really a very professional day, very well organised, very well held. The space was held really well for those women and for us. Yeah. As a media outlet, it was just, the emotion was actually was overwhelming. It was overwhelming.
Absolutely true. At the start, or near the start, there was a very nice lady called Debbie, who was trained in order to give professional help, so counselling and psychology. And it was interesting to see her give a little bit of a talk about what she did and how she tried to help calm down and strengthen some of the women. And because of the emotion that you were talking about there, Jemma, in the day, she had to use her skills at several times during the day when mums, in hearing what was being said, were absolutely overcome with emotion. And I thought she did a really good job at working with them to get them in a better frame of mind.
Absolutely. And again, it was how the charity had held the space. They knew that they would need somebody like that. They knew that people were going to break down. And she was the kind of fulcrum of, where you could go. And she was holding the space for a lot of women who were just in floods.
Close to it.
Well, we saw one of the speakers, who very bravely told her story and then just almost collapsed at the end with emotion and shaking and sobbing. And it was so much bravery there.
Yes. Something which I learnt from that group of women, which I've not learnt from the other mums that I've talked to, and that was that for many of them it's a feeling of shame that these terrible circumstances have happened. Sometimes they clearly haven't made good choices in their lives, but do they deserve to have their children simply taken away, or babies taken away, or all their children taken away? The answer's got to be no. But it came to the surface quite quickly that a lot of them, one of the key things stopping them moving forward was that as a result of what had happened to them, they felt this intense shame inside. And that was something I absolutely learnt from.
Yes. And I do remember in one of the early conversations of the day where one of the women spoke to me and said, you do carry the shame because people do have the attitude of there's no smoke without fire. There's got to be a reason this has happened. Well, there are reasons, but they're not the reasons you would think, that the women are incapable mothers. They're different reasons, which we'll probably go into. But I did think at the start of the day, I was thinking like that. Well, it's got to be something here. And what I heard, it made me question everything again. I question everything anyway, since leaving the mainstream and before that. But the system, the reasons behind controlling women, why sever the mother-child bond, why this rush to, and you answered some of those questions actually when you gave your presentation. But the questions I came away with were not the questions I walked in that door at the beginning of the day. It was a transformative day.
It was, absolutely. I was very, very impressed with the way that the charity was approaching its work. So what's the important thing for them? Strengthening the women, taking them from being wrecks in some cases, and I don't mean that in any disparaging way, but women in a very bad place, to get them strengthened so at least they can start to have a life, and then when they get stronger in that life, hopefully they're in a position where they can go on to have a better life, and or be doing something to carry on fighting for their children. But the overall theme, the overall emotion through that is the loss of the children. And as one of them said to me, the thing is, if your child dies, you have to accept that and you grieve, and then you can move on. But if you don't have your child and you don't know where your child is and you don't know how they're being treated, your mind is just full of the emotion of your lost child the whole time. And so that was another very powerful thing that was said to me. But the charity tries to build the mothers up, and this is fantastic. And what I tried to do in that presentation was to be saying that if you are in a stronger place as a mother, you can fight for your children better. So you're going to perform better in court if you're in a stronger place. And I don't know, you might have thought I was being a bit brutal at one stage, but I said to the mothers what I believe is absolutely true, that if the mums cry at the wrong time, they lose, because there's nothing the court loves better than an absolute broken emotional mum, because then they can accuse her of having emotional problems and breakdown and being an unsuitable mother. So if you show too much emotion, the system attacks you, and if you show too little emotion, and several of the mums actually talked about that, didn't they?
They did, yeah. And then they said the paradox is, of course, because the system seems very geared to this subjugation of women, is they said if the woman cries, that's it, game over. You know, she's a hysterical mess, not capable of looking after her kids. If a father cries, apparently, these are the stories that were relayed to me, if a father cries in a family court, he's seen as a sensitive, caring man, not a hysterical, piece of work. And again, everything seems designed to just
beat them down.
Yes. Any showing of anything human, forget it.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the system all over. Don't be human.
So the mum cries and she's going to lose, because that'll be used against her. And this is one of the things that I said. And what I was trying to do was to actually show those mums that there is a way of fighting, but they have to start to act in a different way. What they wear makes a difference. So a lot of mums will go into court wearing very casual clothes, the sorts of clothes they probably feel comfortable in. But in the power dynamics of a court, that doesn't always put them in the best light, particularly if it's just a scruffy T-shirt. And so in my mind, I can see that in the right place and the right time, some of these mums can be helped to fight more effectively through the family court system, as corrupt as it is, but they can do certain things to help that. And the other thing is that they have to understand what they're up against. And so that little film clip that I put together of the mums that we've done the interviews with. So that was Sam, the black lady, who's phenomenal. The Portuguese lady. So Sam, who's had 2 children taken away. Yolanda, who'd had a baby taken at birth. That was horrific, horrific one. Juliet, who was speaking out on the abuse of her granddaughter. And then the last lady, who was anonymous, was talking about having her 2 very young children taken away. And she was holding up the dummy and the little, I'm not sure what you call the baby grow. Is that what it's called? Yeah. So she held up the dummy and the baby grow to say these were the only things that she got left to remember her children by, because, of course, in talking to me in the interview, she wasn't allowed to show photographs of her babies. So that film clip, I really thought very hard about. It was only 9 minutes long, little clips of these mums speaking, but I put it up in order to show the mums in the room they were not alone, and also that UK Column knew what it was doing in interviewing them. But you said to me at one point stop it. And because that little video clip created a lot of very strong emotion amongst some of the women, to the extent that they got so emotional they had to leave the room. But I didn't want to stop the clip because that was us demonstrating that we actually knew what it was about. And I got some nice comments about it at the end of the day. One lady said, I nearly couldn't watch it, but I did, and I'm glad I did.
I thought you doing that was a gamble. I mean, it was the second half of the day, and you were obviously showing the charity and all of the mums in there what the column was about, the coverage that we've done on the state stealing children, which is what this is all about.
State stealing.
Yeah, the state stealing children. And you were obviously showing the women, look, this is our pedigree. This is the work that particularly you have done and the column have done. And then so it came in with stories and a few stories of headshots with mums, but then got into those very emotive clips and the dummy and the baby grow and the one at the end where the police turned up at someone's house to take tiny children out of their mother's arms. That got the whole room. And I was like, Brian, turn it off. And you were like, no, I'm going to show it. And I thought, God, that is quite brutal and quite, none of these mums, do they need to have their trauma re-triggered to such an extent? But it did work. It did work. And I think that it did get them to trust the column. Yeah. And trust that we can help, which is what we want to do.
And we know what we're talking
and we
about.
Know what we're talking about.
This is the key thing.
Yeah.
And the other bit that we did is which I thought was an important thing to talk about, was to be showing them the size of the beast that they're up against, that many of them think that everything that's happened to them is just focused on them as individuals, when in fact 24 mums in the room show, no, this is happening to a lot of other mums. It's thousands is the reality. But how big the beast is they're up against. And to try and demonstrate how cruel the system is, I put up the little BBC clip of the Tory whip, Tim Fortescue. I think the date was 1995. You can find that on YouTube as a little interview the whip gave to the BBC, in which he casually says, well, MPs came to us with their problems. It could be money. It could be little boys. And we fixed it for them. And why did we fix it? We fixed it because then they would do as we asked. So there you have a senior politician with immense power. I think he was the chief whip, but he certainly a whip, admitting that the Conservative Party was covering up the abuse of children in order that they could blackmail MPs into doing what the party political system wanted.
Yeah.
And that clip in front of the mums also, because I had several of them say to me, I've never seen that clip before. And I said to them, do you understand what it means? Oh, they got what it meant.
Yeah, they did.
They did.
They did. Yeah, and I thought it was very well done how you did say to the women, oh, I bet they said this to you in court. Yeah, they did. Oh, I bet your social worker might have said this. Yeah. And it's like, it's a pattern.
Yes.
It's a script. It's a template that the system is using to take these children. And of course you do, because they're so heightened, they take it, internalise it and think, well, it's because of me.
Yes.
Which is probably some of the backgrounds that these women have had, the childhoods. They have internalised a lot and thought, oh, this is because of me.
Yes.
This trauma, this environment is because of me, because that's how children think. And then you carry it with you to the rest of your life. So it's trauma upon trauma. And I think the system knows very well, hearing that, it is a template. It's nothing to do with you. It's just a template to get your kids. Is that the system knows how to manipulate people in trauma. We saw that 2020 onwards. I mean, you put the whole world in trauma and you can manipulate it and make it do whatever you want.
Absolutely.
And so that's what the system is doing on a smaller scale. Well, it's not that small with this taking of kids.
Yes. And we then did our best to lead them to, well, okay, if you're going to fight something, you've got to understand what you're up against. But once we'd talked through that, the idea that the mums haven't got to drown in hundreds or thousands of pages of court documentation, which they see as the evidence. If the mums talk to you about what's happened in the case, to them the evidence is everything that's in the court bundles. It's the emails, it's the letters, it's the telephone call transcripts. And I said to them, when I really wanted to say to them, no, the evidence is you. And the more mums that come forward to talk about what's happened and how it's happened, that forms the real body of evidence, and that is what needs to be exposed to the wider public. And we did get a response. So we have got 3 ladies. I think there may be another one from that group who have been in contact with us and said, my goodness, we got something out of what you did, and I think I'd like to speak out.
Yeah.
And that is a huge plus, because it means we've taken people from being, albeit in a very nice support group, to saying, no, don't just be in a support group, come and fight. And that to me was a big plus, that we had that connectivity.
Absolutely. But I do think it's down as well, the testament, as I go back to the start, of like, I was expecting a certain type of person when I walked through the door, and what I found was bravery, strength, empathy, and so much courage. And I think, explaining things the way you did to them, I mean, I was just an observer, but making, contacts. But it did spark something in a lot of them where they thought, yeah, I'm going to do it, because they want their kids back, and 2, they've seen so much injustice, and that bravery in all of them, that heart-centered was the word courage. It means courage, doesn't it? I think it comes from the heart. And that's, so brilliant that we've got some from that group that will speak to us. And the stories, I think, will resonate with more and more people as the reach of those stories and the issue itself, it comes more into the public. Comes up.
Yeah. So looking back on it now, a few days have gone past, looking back on it, what do you think you got out of it?
Well, I looked at myself. I looked at myself and my mainstream media training, and I thought, it hasn't left me yet. So indoctrinated how they train you in the mainstream, that you know what the story is before you go. And I did have a bit of that in my head. So it really made me look at myself there. I was quite embarrassed, actually, that I'd gone in with that attitude. But that's my brainwashing from my former career. And then I was thinking about the women and the ones that I spoke to, and how there were some parallels with my own life and going through trauma in a particular relationship, which wasn't very healthy for me. And I was hearing that, and I was really hearing about this control of women. It's about the control of women. That was what my instincts were telling me, is this is all about keeping women in their place almost. It's really hard to explain unless you were there. But the women's stories in themselves, with the ones I spoke to, were so similar about the abusive partner, about the domestic violence, and about escaping the domestic violence, escaping the partner. And as soon as they asked for the divorce or said, I'm leaving you, I don't want to be battered anymore, that was when, right, I'm getting the kids. I'm going to take the kids. If you're going to leave me, I'll get the kids. And they did, the partners did. And I thought, this is all about, it's about you, it's not about the kids. And also one woman said to me, the husband or boyfriend had said, I'll go to prison or I'll die before I see you get the kids back. And I thought, that's how warped it is.
And then the whole court system works to support the abusive partner to gain the children. This is the story. And of course, for the women, it's a nightmare, because most of them they obviously don't want to go near the family court, but when they do, they're approaching it that this court is going to be fair and it's going to come to sensible decisions. And then they're in this closed court, star chamber is what it is, with no jury and no proper press, where everything is turned on them. That's what's so vicious about it. And that's what does so much damage to them, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the system's been geared up, if we want to go really deep, the system's been geared up against women for quite some time. But then I was also approaching it from another level. And there was a lot of talk in there from me to other women about this rise of the divine feminine, which has been bandied about in some circles. Not everybody will resonate with that. And I thought these women in this charity and the ones that are now brave enough to speak out, bravely speaking out, this is some kind of energetic shift, which we saw 2020 onwards, of like people saying no to the system.
Yeah.
And saying, no, you're not telling me what to put in my body, and you're certainly not having my kids. And it was the same kind of dynamic on a smaller scale of what a lot of us collectively in 2020 said, no, this is wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not staying at home. This is all wrong. Instinctively in my heart, I know this is all wrong. And these women are feeling the same way.
And actually something we should mention is that for a lot of the women in these cases, certainly there was a couple in that room, but for a lot of women who've experienced these problems countrywide, it was compounded during COVID lockdown, because if you've got an abusive partner and you're locked up with them 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, because the government's put you in that situation, that caused huge problems. And this is why statistically you can see this huge surge in children that were taken during that period. So, yeah, this is a very interesting point. It was a privilege. It was an incredible day. I was able to sit and chat to a couple of the ladies sort of at the end of the day before I drove back. But in my drive from close to London back down to Plymouth, it was a swirl in my brain. It really made an impact on me. And in fact, it was there Saturday morning in particular. So very emotional, but what a privilege to be invited to go and meet them. And I was asked if I'd write a little article for their newsletter, which I've done. I'm waiting to know whether my words have been approved. But if they do use those words, that text, in their newsletter, then I will feel that it's okay to pop that up on the UK Column website with this video, and our viewers get a better reflection of the day. I'll emphasise that the reason I'm being coy about the charity is because they receive funding, of course, from a number of sources. They need to function as a charity because they're doing good work. But people have got reason to believe that if they deal with news channels that are challenging the system, maybe this will cause problems. And we don't want to cause any problem to their setup and their organisation and their funding stream. But what I am hoping is that they're also going to perhaps give the UK Column permission to do a one-off fundraiser for them, because I'd really like to raise money for that group of women, because I think they're doing a brilliant job.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Well, there we are, Gemma. That wasn't too painful, was it?
Well, it was a brilliant experience for me. And now being in the studio to talk about it, it's my first appearance in the new studio, since I began working with you guys a few months ago. And it was a really interesting day in how the column goes out and showcases what we do. We're not the mainstream. We never will be. And we tackle the stories. And this is the story the mainstream should be absolutely investigating. Of course, it won't go near it. We all know why.
No, of course.
So for me, it was a double whammy, really, in how the column's journalism is received. And it was received exceptionally well by an exceptional group of people. And collaboration is key in these crazy times. So we hope to support them as much as we can.
Do more. Brilliant. Jemma, thank you very much for joining me in the UK Column studio.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Yeah.